She was screaming again. Your trashy trailer violates HOA Code 14B, and that disgusting boat in your driveway? It's gone today or I'm calling the police. I stepped outside, wiping the grease off my hands. I had just finished fixing the engine on my old fishing boat. The same boat my daughter Lily loved to sit in every evening, pretending she was sailing across oceans. She couldn't walk, polio took that from her, but her imagination never had limits. That boat was her world. Karen, the self-proclaimed president of our street's fake HOA, was waving a clipboard and barking at my house like she owned it. But I knew for a fact there was no HOA, just her, printing out fake notices and harassing anyone who didn't bow to her delusions. You've been warned, she yelled, snapping a picture of my driveway. And don't think your sob story makes you special. Everyone follows the rules here. I didn't answer. I never did. Not because I was scared, because I was watching. People like her always take it one step too far. Later that evening, I went inside to help Lily with dinner. We were making macaroni and laughing about how she'd name her imaginary ship the Brave Peanut. The sound of laughter. It didn't last long. There was a loud whoosh outside, then orange light, then screams, not mine, hers. I ran outside and froze. My boat, the same boat where Lily kept her books and stuffed animals. It was up in flames. Karen stood across the street, her eyes wide but her lips twitching like she was proud. She shouldn't have left junk on the lawn, she said coldly. Now it's handled. I couldn't move. Lily's wheelchair sat empty on the grass. Karen didn't know. Lily had been in the boat just minutes ago. I sprinted toward the flames, heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to break. Free. Smoke punched the air thick and black, swallowing everything in sight. I heard coughing, small panicked gasps. Lily. Without thinking, I dove into the smoke. The heat clawed at my skin, but I found her huddled at the far edge of the boat, her face streaked with ash and tears. She was trying to crawl out but couldn't lift herself over the side. I've got you, baby, I whispered, wrapping my arms around her and lifting her out. Behind me, the fire roared louder. I dropped to my knees on the lawn, clutching Lily, as she sobbed into my shoulder. My hands trembled, not from fear but from rage. Karen was still standing there, arms folded, watching like it was all just a neighborhood disagreement. You set fire to my daughter, I shouted, voice hoarse. You knew she was in there, Karen scoffed. I didn't see her, so how could I know? Maybe next time think twice before cluttering the community. That was it. I stood up slowly, still holding Lily close. Are you crazy? One of the neighbors yelled. A small crowd had gathered now, drawn out by the smoke, the heat, and the sound of a child nearly dying. Phones were out, cameras recording. Karen's smirk began to slip. I'm calling the real authorities. She barked. That was a safety hazard. She could have... She almost died, I snapped, cutting her off. And you're about to find out what happens when you mess with the wrong man. Because what Karen didn't know was this. I've worked in fire investigation for over 15 years. I am the fire marshal for this entire county. And I had just recognized the exact brand of accelerant she used. I set Lily down gently in the grass, wrapped her in my jacket, and turned back to the blaze. The boat crackled behind me, almost reduced to ash, but my eyes were locked on Karen. She took a step back. What did you just say? She asked, voice suddenly shaky. I said I'm the fire marshal, I replied, slow and steady. And I know exactly what gasoline mix you used. Same kind we recovered in the Miller arson case. Smells like citrus, burns hotter than regular fuel. You've got it on your shoes. She looked down without thinking. Her pristine white sneakers were speckled with soot and blackened drops. Her fake confidence cracked like glass. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she stammered. I thought it would scare you. Just a small fire. You're overreacting. Tell that to the child you nearly burned alive, someone shouted from the crowd. More people were filming now. I could see a few neighbors I never talked to before stepping forward, shaking their heads in disgust. I took out my phone. Not to call 911. I had already radioed dispatch the moment I saw the flames. No, I opened my secure app, the one linked directly to our county's incident database. I started recording a statement on site with my badge ID, time, and GPS coordinates. Standard protocol. Karen's mouth fell open. "You can't do this. I'll sue you for slander." "Save it," I said, turning the camera toward her. "Your voice is already on record. Witnesses, footage, accelerant residue, and a disabled child as the victim. You didn't just start a fire. You committed felony arson and attempted manslaughter." Her skin went pale. Suddenly, two squad. Cars rolled up, sirens off, but lights flashing. My guys. The same officers I've trained on arson scenes for years. Karen turned to run. Big mistake. She barely made it 2 steps before Officer Ramirez tackled her to the ground. She screamed, high-pitched and furious, as her hands were pulled behind her back. "You can't do this to me. I run this neighborhood. I own this street," she shrieked, kicking as the cuffs clicked shut. Ramirez didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for arson, endangerment of a minor, impersonating an HOA official, and trespassing. You have the right to remain silent, and I highly suggest you use it." The crowd was dead silent. All you could hear was the fire crackling down to embers and Karen's breathless gasping. Neighbors stood frozen, some with jaws dropped, some slowly clapping like they didn't believe it was real. One woman whispered, "She burned a child's boat. For what?" "Control?" A man next to her muttered. "I always knew she was nuts, but this is evil." Meanwhile, I knelt beside Lily. She was still wrapped in my jacket, clutching her stuffed giraffe, the fur singed at the ears but otherwise intact. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would she do that?" I looked at her, fighting to keep my voice steady. Because sometimes people think they're above others. That rules don't apply to them. But today, she learned otherwise. Karen was hauled into the cruiser, screaming something about her husband being a lawyer and how this whole town will pay. No one listened. No one even looked at her. Officer Briggs walked over to me. "We got everything, sir. Witnesses, security footage from the Wilkinson's doorbell cam across the street, and your official report. Ironclad." I nodded, finally exhaling. "Good. Make sure she stays away from every kid in this neighborhood." As they drove off with Karen still screaming in the back seat, Lily looked up at me and said something that stopped me cold. She said I didn't belong here. "But this is our home, right?" I held her tighter. "It always has been. And no one takes that from us." The next morning I stepped outside with Lily resting in my arms. The charred remains of the boat were still there, smoldering blackened wood, the skeleton of what once was her little escape. But something was different now. There were people on my lawn, not trespassing, helping. Mr. Evans from down the street was dragging lumber out of his truck bed. The twins from next door were painting pieces of plywood in bright blue and yellow. Someone had even brought cushions and a plastic wheel to mount on the bow. "What's all this?" I asked. Mrs. Jenkins smiled through tears. "We're rebuilding. The brave Peanut. Your girl deserves better than ashes." Lily blinked, confused. "They're making me a new boat?" "Not just a boat," Evans said. "This one's gonna float. We're gonna take it down to the lake once it's done. Whole neighborhood's in." I had no words, and the woman who once called me trash, the one who tried to burn my daughter alive over imaginary rules, she was nowhere to be seen. In a jail, awaiting formal charges, stripped of her fake titles and power. News vans came later that afternoon. The footage had gone viral, over 2 million views in 12 hours. HOA Karen sets boat on fire with disabled child inside, gets arrested by Fire Marshal dad. That was the headline. Harsh, but fair. A reporter asked me what I thought of all the attention. I looked at Lily, then back at the camera. "I didn't do anything special," I said. "I protected my kid. That's what dads do. This land, this street, this home, It's ours. And no clipboard tyrant with a printed notice changes that. The clip aired on every local channel. People sent messages from across the country, veterans, parents, even firefighters I'd worked with years ago. One message stood out. I didn't fight in Iraq to come home and watch neighbors turn on each other. You reminded me what real American grit looks like. That one hit deep. A few days later, the courtroom was packed. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her face drained of all the smug confidence she once wore like perfume. Her lawyer looked exhausted, probably from trying to spin arson and attempted harm on a disabled child into some kind of misunderstanding. Good luck with that. I sat in the back row holding Lily's hand. She wore her little pink sun hat, the one she insisted made her look nautical. Even in court, she smiled when she talked about her new boat. The judge glanced over the paperwork, adjusted her glasses, and then stared directly at Karen. You set fire to a boat you knew did not belong to you. You ignored clear safety risks. Most damning of all, you placed a child's life in danger, all in the name of imaginary authority. There is no registered HOA in your community. What you did was illegal, cruel, and entirely unjustified. Karen mumbled something about neighborhood standards. The judge cut her off. Save it. You don't get to speak for a neighborhood when you're its biggest threat. She banged the gavel. Bail denied. You'll remain in custody until trial. The crowd exhaled together. Some even clapped softly. Karen was led out, red-faced, and silent this time. No screaming, no threats. Outside the courthouse, a local veteran group waited by my truck. They'd seen the story online and they brought something for Lily, an American flag folded tightly with a note attached. For courage at sea, even on land, from one fighter to another. Lily beamed, hugging it close like a blanket. Xiao. We drove home. She looked up at me and said, Daddy, us do bad people always lose in the end? I thought about it for a second. Then I said, no, not always, but when good people stick together and don't back down, they never win either. She nodded, quietly absorbing that. And just as we turned onto our street, she whispered, I want to be a fire marshal too someday. I smiled, eyes stinging. You already are, baby. You walked through fire and never gave up. A week later, the new boat was finished. The whole neighborhood gathered around it, right on our front lawn. This one was bigger, sturdier, and painted in bold letters across the side was her chosen name, the Brave Peanut 2.0. Lily sat in the captain's seat, grinning ear to ear, holding her stuffed giraffe like it was her first mate. People cheered, took pictures, some even brought cupcakes, and this time there wasn't a single clipboard or fake notice in sight. But there was one final twist no one saw coming. Right as we were about to roll the boat toward the trailer, a sleek black SUV pulled up. The door opened, and out stepped Chief Halloran, my direct superior at the fire department. Marshal, he said, nodding. I stood up straight. Chief, didn't expect you here. He walked over, his gaze scanning the boat, the crowd, then landing on Lily. He gave her a warm smile. Been following the case closely, he said quietly. City Council had a meeting last night. What happened here struck a nerve. Across the entire state. You kept your cool, documented everything, and protected your community under pressure. That's leadership. I frowned, unsure where he was going. He handed me a sealed envelope. That's why, effective immediately, we're offering you the position of Deputy Regional Fire Chief. Pay bump. Full authority across 3 counties. My breath caught. That was a position people waited years for. I looked down at Lily. She was beaming. But why me? I asked. Because you didn't just fight fire. You fought injustice and did it right. I opened the envelope, still stunned. The neighbors clapped as I read the offer. Some patted my shoulder. Others just nodded, eyes full of quiet respect. Later that night, I tucked Lily into bed. Her giraffe rested beside her, and her eyes fluttered closed with the kind of peace we hadn't felt in weeks. Before I turned off the light, she whispered one last thing. Daddy, we didn't just get justice, did we? I smiled. No, baby. We got our home back, and this time, not even fire could take it away. 2 months later, the street looked different. Not just because the brave Peanut 2.0 now had her own little dock by the lake, or because the grass finally grew back where Karen had stomped around, like she owned it. It felt different, lighter, freer. People waved when they passed. Kids played without being shushed. Porch lights glowed longer into the evening, like the whole neighborhood had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. As for Karen, she never came back. Her trial went public and the charges stuck: arson, attempted harm to a child, impersonation of authority. The footage from the day of the fire was played in court. Her face, her voice, her words, undeniable. The judge sentenced her to 5 years, no parole. The HOA notices were gone. The fake rules burned with the boat. The fear she'd built around herself? Ashes. One morning I stood on the porch sipping coffee, watching Lily wheel her giraffe across the driveway in a little wagon someone from the firehouse had built her. She looked stronger now. Not just physically, something inside her had changed. Tougher. Braver. A new neighbor, recently moved from another state, walked over. "Heard this place had some drama," he said, smiling. "Something about a rogue, HOA queen and a dad with a badge?" I chuckled. "Something like that." He nodded toward Lily. "That her?" "Yep," I said. "Captain of the neighborhood navy." He laughed, then got serious. "Glad someone stood up to the craziness. My brother's a vet." Said he watched the video and cried. Said it reminded him what America's supposed to be. I looked out at the street, our street, and felt that again. Not pride. Something deeper. Belonging. We weren't just the family Karen tried to push out. We were the ones who stayed, the ones who stood our ground. And no matter what came next, this was our place. Not because someone allowed it, but because we earned it together. For the first time in a long while, I smiled without worry. We weren't just safe. We were home. A few months later, something arrived in the mail that stopped me cold. It was a thick, official-looking envelope from the governor's office. At first, I thought it might be some standard safety inspection paperwork, or maybe a regional update on fire protocols. But when I opened it, a gold-embossed certificate slipped out, along with a handwritten note. For exceptional service to the state and its people, for protecting not just your family but the values we stand for: courage, honor, and justice. You didn't just put out a fire, you lit a spark. Thank you, Fire Marshal Grant. The certificate was a state recognition for civil bravery. Rare. The kind you don't apply for. The kind given when people in power notice something they can't ignore. I stared at it for a long while. Later that evening, the city invited us to a town hall ceremony. Lily got a tiny medal shaped like a flame. They called her a junior hero. She wore it every day for a week, even to bed. But it wasn't about medals or certificates anymore. It was about the people, the change. I started getting calls from other neighborhoods, small towns dealing with real HOA abuse, folks afraid to speak up, veterans being pushed out by code violations and power-drunk board members. They weren't just calling for advice. They were calling for hope. So I started something new, Project Ember, a nonprofit led by fire service veterans, military families, and legal allies, focused on protecting homeowners from harassment, abuse of power, and false HOA claims. We help them fight back the right way. Legal, tactical, unbreakable. Lily even designed the logo, a small flame in a shield. The Karen who thought she could burn our boat had no idea she lit a movement. And as the years passed, people remembered what happened on our street, not as just another viral clip, but as the moment one voice said enough, and others followed. That's the real fire that caught on. 1. Family. one fight, and a flame that never went out. A year later, on the anniversary of the fire, we held a block party. But not just any party. We called it Freedom on Fire, and this time the whole town showed up. Food trucks lined the street. Veterans from 3 counties brought flags. Fire engines parked with ladders extended high above, draped in red, white, and blue. Kids got helmets and junior badges. And right at the center of it all, floating in the shallow lake, the Brave Peanut 2.0, freshly painted and now fitted, with lights that sparkled as the sun dipped low. People came from across the state, families who'd been pushed around by fake HOAs, single parents who'd once felt voiceless. Even a family from Texas drove up just to say thank you. Turns out they'd seen the video the day they almost sold their home in fear. They didn't sell. They stayed. Because they saw us stand. That night, the mayor stepped up to the mic, looked right at Lily, and said, "Sometimes the smallest captains carry the biggest courage. And sometimes justice begins with one family refusing to be bullied." The crowd roared, and then, without warning, they turned toward us and started chanting, "This is our land, this is our home. This is our land. This is our home." Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide. "They're saying what you said, Daddy." I knelt beside her and whispered, "No, baby. They're saying what we proved." As fireworks exploded above the lake, painting the sky with every color of fire, I held her close. The crowd cheered, the flames danced, and the smoke drifted into the stars like a message carried on the wind. You can threaten us, you can scare us, you can burn what we build, but you'll never break what we believe in. Because in this country, we don't just fight fire, we become it. And we rise from it stronger, every single time. Months after the celebration, something unexpected happened. A knock came at our door late one evening. It was Karen's husband, looking worn and desperate. "I need to talk," he said, eyes flickering between hope and shame. Turns out, he had been in the dark about everything. The fake HOA notices, the threats, the fire, it was all Karen's doing. He'd tried to stop her but was trapped in silence. "I want to help make this right," he said quietly. "I've seen what you've built here. I don't want to lose my family or my home." I studied him carefully, weighing years of pain against this sudden change. "Fine," I said. "But this only works if you stand with us. No more lies, no more fake power plays. You earn back trust one honest step at a time." He nodded. The first real sign of humility I'd seen from their side. From that day, he became a quiet ally, helping spread word about Project Ember, warning others before HOAs crossed the line, and even volunteering at community events. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something far harder. Change. Because sometimes, the fiercest battles don't end with fire. They end when people choose to rebuild. Years later, as Lily prepared to leave for college, she stood by the dock looking out at the water. "The boat got me through a lot, huh?" she said softly. I smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "More than that, it brought us all together, made us stronger." She looked back at me, eyes shining with quiet pride. "You know, I'm thinking of joining the fire service, like you said, becoming a fire marshal." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I can't think of anyone better for the job. As she turned to walk away, a neighbor called out, "Hey, Captain, don't forget us when you're saving the world." Lily laughed, then glanced back. "I won't. This is where it all started." I watched her go, knowing the fight wasn't just ours anymore. It was hers, and everyone's who believed in standing up against power, protecting what's rightfully theirs, and never backing down. Because sometimes, the biggest fires don't burn buildings, they ignite legacies. Years had passed, but the story we lived kept echoing. One afternoon, I got a call from a national news producer. "They want to do a documentary," she said. "Your fight against..." That HOA Karen, the fire, the community coming together, it's powerful, real. People need to see it. At first I hesitated. Our life was private. But then I thought about Lily, about Project Ember, and the message we'd fought so hard to send. This isn't just our story, I told her. It's every family that's ever stood up to injustice. The film aired nationwide, sparking conversations in towns across America. Calls poured in, some from families facing harassment, others from veterans inspired to get involved. And through it all, one thing remained clear. No matter how dark the fire or how fierce the flames, truth and courage shine brightest. Because, in this country, standing up for your home isn't just a right. It's a legacy worth fighting for. The day after the documentary aired, something unexpected happened. I received a call from the HOA board president of a nearby town, one known for its heavy-handed tactics and questionable rules. He wanted to meet. Curious, I agreed. At the meeting, he was polite but cautious. "We've been watching what you did," he said. "The way you exposed the abuse, the community response. It's changed how we operate. No more fake notices. No more intimidation. We want to rebuild trust." I stared at him surprised. "You really mean that?" He nodded slowly. "We don't want to be the villains anymore." That moment, when the bully started to change, that was one of the hardest but most important victories of all. Because sometimes, fighting fire doesn't just protect your home. It lights the way for others to change too. Years from that moment, I stood at the entrance of a new community center we helped build, a place dedicated to educating homeowners about their rights and empowering families to stand up against abuse. Lily, now a trained fire marshal herself, stood beside me, proudly wearing her uniform. As the ribbon was cut, she turned to me and said, "Daddy, we did it. We made sure no one else has to."
Feel powerless?
I nodded, feeling the weight and warmth of everything we'd been through. Because this story, our story, was never just about a fire or a fight with one woman named Karen. It was about standing tall when the world tries to burn you down. It was about protecting family, home, and freedom. And most of all, it was about passing the flame forward, so others could carry it, brighter and stronger than ever before.